Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Lucas Thomas, also known as LT Copywriting, or your right-hand man in real estate, depending on what capacity you follow me. If you follow me through ltanswers.com, then you're following me in my education or my meta learning background, as well as my copywriting background. But if you're following me as one of my real estate or how to make passive income in real estate, then you're probably following me on my right-hand man real estate side and how I help clients buy rental properties or create passive income for themselves. Today what we're going to talk about, it's an extension of what we were talking about last week, which is the three financial types of people of the world. And of the three financial types of people in the world, there is the highly wealthy individual. And here are the three principles of the highly wealthy. Now, let's get started with a quick summary of the three principles that we're going to, before we get into the meat of the three principles, let's go over a quick summary of everything. So, summary number one is, principle number one is you can't do everything yourself. Now, what does this principle mean? It essentially means that too many people, if they become well off, they never get to be highly wealthy because they're too afraid to clone themselves, or they're too afraid to let other people, take their idea, or, they're too afraid to hire somebody else to go out and make money for them. So what happens is, let's say you're a restaurant manager, and you start a business, and you run a restaurant, and the restaurant does incredibly well and you're well off, but you're too afraid to hire someone to replace you to take over the restaurant so you can go start another one, or start another one and start another one. So essentially you're never going to be able to become highly wealthy because you won't let other people, you don't trust other people to take care of your business and make money for you. And that's a real big issue that's a real big thing if you want to become highly wealthy. Number two is you have to take calculated risks. This is another thing that happens to people who are well off. They're too afraid to take any risk at all, and they'll only put money in they only put money in things that they think are a sure thing. Well, the only thing that is sure in life is nothing. So what happens with these people is that because they're too afraid to take any risk at all, they'll never make any money at all. And this doesn't mean that you have to take silly or stupid risks. It means it's a balancing act of you have to take enough risk that it makes sense for you to take that risk, but then you have to take enough risk where it makes sense. So, which goes into, to take those calculated risks, you have to understand principle 3, which is, if you don't understand it, don't invest in it. So, principle 3 kind of goes into principle 2, which is, or principle 1, because if you have to have a fundamental understanding of what you're investing in before you can hire the people to do it for you, or before you can take that calculated risk with someone else or in your own business. So, and too many times what happens with people is that they buy into the hype. They buy into the hype of, oh, hey, this is the next best thing, the best way to make money right now. And then everybody piles into it, and then it turns out, they never even had any revenue, or they never actually made any money before everyone invested. And then by the time they get to the end, the entire thing collapses and everybody loses a bunch of money. And there's a really good quote or a good saying for this. If someone has to sell you on an investment, it's probably not a good investment. And that's why you have to, with principle number 3, you have to be able to understand what people are trying to tell. You have to understand what they're trying to sell you before. You have to have a fundamental understanding of what you're trying to do before you do it. Okay, perfect. And then now let's get more into the meat of the 3 principles. Now let's go over the first principle of why the highly wealthy individual is different than the perpetually broke person as well as the well-off person. Now principle 1 is you have to understand this fundamental principle to be successful at anything. You have to understand that you can't do everything yourself. So principle number 1 is you can't do everything yourself. Why? Because if you did everything yourself, you would have, even if you were successful, it would take you so much time to make that minuscule amount of money that it wouldn't make any sense. That it's kind of like being like, oh, well, it's going to take me 5 years to make $100,000. Well, you could have a minimum wage job and work really well. You could be a well-off person with 2 minimum wage jobs, and you could easily make $100,000 over 5 years. And that's essentially the same concept, where you need to hire people, or you need to understand you need to hire people or have somebody who can help you make money while you're not there. A good little story about how this principle works is myself, I do real estate for a living. I do fix and flips, wholesales, I also do buy and holds, and I do rentals. So I'm also a landlord. And my biggest thing is I'm not a plumber and I don't want to learn to become a plumber. Instead, whenever I have problems on one of my properties, I just hire a plumber and the plumber fixes the problem. Technically it'd be cheaper. It'd be cheaper overall to, learn how to do it myself, but it doesn't make any sense for me to learn how to do it myself because I can just pay some guy $100 or $200, to save me the time and the effort of having to learn. And that's a big thing. And a lot of people get hung up on this because, they don't trust people. They'll never trust anyone. And they're like, well, if they can't do it right, you got to do it yourself concept. And you'd be amazed how many people, this is what keeps them from becoming a highly wealthy individual. They won't do any investments because they understand that they can't have full control over it because, you have to have an employee, or you have to have a contractor, you have to have a financial advisor, and that's what really keeps them, either in the perpetual broke category or the well-off category, because they refuse to take on any risk or trust someone to help make money for them. And it can really be detrimental to your financial standing as well as your wealth, because you can do one fix and flip. So good examples of fix and flip. You could do one fix and flip yourself. You could inspect it yourself. You could do all of the flooring. You could paint the whole house yourself. You could do the whole thing yourself. And you can make $40,000 after doing 6 months of work. So that's 6 months of hard work for $40,000, okay? And that's you actually working. Whereas you could, have a crew of people who can, you can have 3 of those crews all working on 3 different fix and flips. And although you're not going to make the same 40 grand on each property, you're going to make about 20 grand on each property. So instead of making 40 grand on, each property that would take you a year and a half to do, you can have 3 properties done in the same 6 months that is making you a net of $60,000. So you're gonna make $60,000 in 6 months, which is a hell of a lot better than $60,000. It was a lot better than $120,000 over a year and a half. Because, once again, and not to mention, you're doing all that work yourself. So that's not 6 months of, just being in charge of this, making sure people are doing their work right. This is more lines of, this is a lot different because you're doing the work. So this is a year and a half of you purely working yourself, whereas having different people work for you, which is why it's a real principle. Number 1 is if you want to be a highly wealthy individual, you have to learn to trust people, or at least know how to, hire them effectively to keep your costs down, but ultimately, start building wealth. So because you can't be everywhere at once, so you have to, clone yourself or recreate yourself through contractors and assets. And that brings us to principle 2 of the highly wealthy individual, which is taking calculated risks. Now, with this principle comes one of the strangest phenomenons I've ever actually seen in people. Is I've seen people, spend $100 willy-nilly on anything. I can throw $100 on this meal. I can throw $100 on those clothes. I can spend $100 on this, new piece of electronics that, I have no real use for. I've seen it countless times, people just throwing $100 away. But if you were to take that same $100 and you were to say, hey, you can invest this $100 for X amount of money return over this much time frame, and you'd be amazed how it goes from, I can throw this $100 on this, I can throw, to, you're gonna have to work your darndest to get this $100 out of me. I want financial statements, I want everything in life, I want everything that you've ever done, and I want you to sign a contract that gives me your firstborn before I will allow you to have my $100. You'd be amazed, and it's the strangest thing. But the reason that this principle is you have to take calculated risks, it's kind of the balance between the two, because too many times I've seen people, to be too risky, like almost like the perpetually broke person, in that they're like, I'm going to make more money tomorrow, so I can spend all my money today. which is too risky. But what affects people even more, such as the well-off person, what the well-off person does is that they're actually too risk adverse that they won't actually invest in anything. So you have like the two different ranges of the spectrum. And the highly wealthy individual takes calculated risk, which is, hey, I will give you this $100 for this investment, but you have to prove to me that it's going to be a good investment. Whereas you have the well-off people who were like, well, I'm not going to give you any money because the risk's too high. And that's why most of the time the highly wealthy or the well-off never really get beyond being the well-off, because they like their stable income, they like their 401ks, and they don't want to take any more risk because they see it, oh, I don't want to, lose all my money, which is strange because in reality, not hedging your bets or, not hedging your bets or having cash flow by, taking on different investments is actually detrimental to their financial portfolio. So it's kind of strange how in real life, you'll find people who, are well off, but then they're too afraid to make investments that they're actually taking on more risk by not investing their money than just keeping it, under their bed or in normal standard investments. Or the perpetually broke person who will give you money no matter what, and they're like, oh, well, if I get money back, that's a win. If I don't get any money back, it's their tax write-off, it's a wash. And it's the strangest thing I've ever seen. But that pretty much gives you the entire principle through that story, such as you have to take calculated risks to become a highly wealthy individual. This risk can be, as much as starting your own business, investing in a startup, or investing in a newly formed business or an up-and-coming business, as well as, buying rental properties, buying holds, doing fix and flips, tax liens, all those alternative investments that you have to, have some sort of expertise or no one who has that expertise to help you, rather than, like stocks, which is, you quite literally just buy an ETF or you buy a mutual fund and that's it. You don't have to worry about it. Whereas some of the other investments, you have to do some due diligence. A lot of people, though, they just won't do any of it because it's too complicated or they don't want to take the risk, and, it seems like a waste of time for a lot of people. So that's a major difference between the well-off and the perpetually broke. The well-off and the perpetually broke from the highly wealthy individual, because they don't have the money to invest, or they're too afraid to invest because they don't want to go into financial ruin. And that's really the other principle you have to get past, such as you can't do everything yourself, so you have to hire people. You also have to understand that you have to take on risk, and that's why you're getting paid a premium on any of your investments, because you're taking on higher risks. You're going to get paid more money on the return, which is an old adage, which is entrepreneurs, the higher risk you take, the more money you'll make in rewards, which is also the same as the higher risk you take, the more likely it is you will end up with nothing, which keeps a lot of people from being well off to highly wealthy. Let's talk about principle 3 of the highly wealthy individual. What is principle 3? Well, it's if you don't understand it, don't invest in it, because too many people, when they first start investing, they get caught up in the hype of things, specifically the hype of new and improved stocks that, they're the next best thing since sliced bread. And whenever people invest in them, all you really have to, and really it's kind of a scheme really, because they get everyone really excited about it, which means they get the stock price to go up really high. But then as soon as the people who get you super excited about it, as soon as they hit the high, they sell their shares, and then you, who got all hyped up and think it's going to go to the moon, it ends up not getting to the moon, and then it falls apart, and then either you lose all your money or you only break even, which is why a big thing when you start investing is don't get caught up in the hype of things. This goes from stocks to real estate to starting your own business. And as we talk about principle 3, we're going to go over, the pros and cons of each. And another thing about if you don't understand it, don't invest in it. So if you're a stock guy, stay as a stock guy, because I have a friend who does nothing but stocks, and then one day he's like, Luke, I want to do real estate, because that's what I do with right-hand man real estate, and I'm a landlord and a property manager. That's what he told me. He's like, man, I want to be a landlord. I want to rent properties. And I'm just like, well, here's the thing. Stocks, I know what kind of person you are. And you don't want to do my business. You don't want to be a landlord. You don't have the customer service ability. You don't have everything else. And he's like, well, no, I want to do it. And the thing was, he ended up doing it. He ended up hating it, and he ended up selling me he ended up, hiring me to do it for him. And that's like a big thing. If you do want to invest in something, you have to make sure that either you have to make sure you're motivated to actually do that investment yourself, or even better is when you can actually hire someone who, isn't, one of the hype guys who's just getting you super hyped, and then in actual execution, they're not that great. And that's one of the hardest parts. But once again, if you are going to hire someone to do this for you, that's why you have to understand that investment, because if the person you're hiring, doesn't understand, or if you don't understand the business, you don't know whether or not he's screwing you over, or he's just, blowing smoke up your ass, or anything else. So the big thing for you is to make sure that if you are going to hire someone, you understand the investment, or if you're going to do it yourself, you have to understand it, but even better, you have to do it yourself and learn the old-fashioned way by, losing a little bit of money, making a little bit of money, and going out of your way. And then that's pretty much the big things with, if you're a stock guy, stay a stock guy, unless you're really motivated and you want to do the other ones, because there's really a million ways to make money in stocks, and there's a million ways to make money in real estate. And it all depends on what you want to do. And if you can't do it yourself, once again, you go back to principle 1, which is if you can't do everything yourself. So really all 3 principles all coincide together to make you a successful investor or just a highly wealthy individual. So that's principle 3. And there you have it. Those are the 3 principles of the highly wealthy individual. Now for the conclusion, we're going to talk about the 3 things you need to learn to enact these principles in your life. Because a lot of times, you can't instill these principles in your life until you've learned some fundamental skills and abilities. So skill and ability number 1 is going to be, you have to learn self-discipline, or you need to learn to discipline yourself. For a lot of people, like we talked in my old video of the 3 financial types of people, there's the perpetually broke person, and the perpetually broke person's perpetually broke because they have no financial, or they have no self-discipline. So number 1 is you need to learn how to budget. You need to learn how to avoid consumer loans, and you need to learn how to spend. You can't spend more than you take in. You need to learn how to, save your money and create a big pile of money so you can actually become highly wealthy, because you can't make any money without having money, and that's what a lot of people don't really understand. And then number 2 is going to be, you have to learn self-diligence. So once you have the discipline to create yourself a big pile of money to invest, or you have to learn you need to learn due diligence. And due diligence just says, hey, now that I have this big pile of money that I've disciplined myself to save up to create, more wealth for myself, such as cash flow, I have to be able to understand what I'm investing in, who I'm hiring to invest in, or to take any calculated risks. I have to be able to see the due diligence. I have to think like an investor. I have to think like a millionaire, and I can't just invest all willy-nilly, because, as I always say, there is no limit to the amount of people in the world who are willing to take your money away from you, either through business, family, friends, or or consumer loans. Everybody. There's not a limit on the amount of people who are willing to relieve you of all the money in your pocket. So, and that's a big thing for the discipline as well as the due diligence. You got to make sure what you're investing is what the salesman is telling you what it is, or whether or not they're misrepresenting it, or they're trying to make you buy into the hype. And that's why a big thing is you need to understand what you're investing in, whether or not this person actually knows what they're talking about, and whether or not it's actually a good investment. That's why, 1, you gotta have the discipline to have a big pile of money, and then 2, you have to be able to do the due diligence to see whether or not this person or what you're investing is actually an investment and not something, something that's, the hype or something silly. And then the last one is that you need to finally learn to get out of your comfort zone. So as soon as you have a big pile of money, too many people people, and you've done all the due diligence, too many people are afraid to actually invest. So in a big fallacy, or a logical fallacy that a lot of people have is, well, it'll be like the perfect deal, but in their minds they'll think, oh hey, there's going to be an even better deal tomorrow. The grass is always greener, so I'm going to let this deal go because tomorrow's deal is going to be 10 times better than today's deal. And the problem is most likely what happened, well, then you're never going to do any deals because you're too afraid to get the deals that work, and you'll never make any money because you're too busy trying to find the perfect deal instead of getting the good deals, and you're too busy trying to get the perfect one. So that's why you need to learn to get out of your comfort zone. You need to be like, hey, I mean, this might not be the best deal in the world, but it's a deal, and a deal's a deal. And if you have the money, invest in it, take it. You might lose a little bit of money, you might make a little money. The thing is like, if you're not investing, if you're not actively pursuing more money, then you're not going to make any money, and that's a big thing, and that's a big thing for investing. So now that you understand these three skills and abilities that you have to instill in yourself, then will help you, put the three principles of the highly wealthy individual into practice, and you'll be able to be successful. So, and ultimately create wealth for yourself. Thank you for watching. If you're still interested, or if you want to learn more about, protecting yourself financially, offensively and defensively, as well as, real estate and other ways to invest, such as starting your own business, please subscribe to my channel, and as always, let me know what you think. Thank you.